The world is in another crisis. This time its existence is due to pandemic. It impacts globally, thus some countries are struggling to keep their economy afloat. In this video, we will take a look at three countries' fiscal positions, which are Japan, Greece, and Kuwait. Also, we will be explaining their revenue as well as their debt to GDP.
Regarding Japan's fiscal situation, Japan has been in a period of economic recovery after Second World War. For example, it has slowly recovered from negative 3.8% of GDP in 2015 to negative 2.8% of GDP in 2019 in fiscal balance. At present, Japan is expected to be affected by the violent global stock market volatility and the impact of the new virus. It is expected that Japan's fiscal deficit will account for 8.0% of GDP in 2021. In terms of debt, Japan's debt as a percentage of GDP, Japan is indeed the largest country, reaching about 250%. From this point of view, Japan is indeed the most indebted country in the world. Why Japan not gone bankrupt? It is because 95% of Japan's national debt is in the hand of domestic people, and the central bank accounts for a large part. This is why Japan's economy has not received much impact from debt. It can also be said that Japan's debt is a turning point in Japan's capital turnover.
Japan has a strong economy. The local consumption as well as export consumptions were regularly calculated, and the production of the food producers and other items are regularly monitored and produced. The monetary and fiscal policy of Japan and the regulation and its availability, the cost of credit and debit. A fiscal policy which controls the economy of Japan is in greater depth. While the fiscal and monetary policy of Japan constantly varying with respect to the local production and export production, the inside the local production is strong, and it's constantly maintain the production, so that the expert completely doing other than the local country consumption, so that the exports unit is very much more than the country's own consumption. At any time controls its policy to control its economy. I like it. At any time controls its policy to control its economy.
Next is Greece country. Greece became the 10th member of the European Union on January 1, 1981. The country's economy and finances were in good shape, but the situation deteriorated dramatically over the next 30 years because fiscal profligacy, which is defined as wasteful and excessive expenditure, caused deficits and debt levels to explode. So that's why Greece involved in a financial problem which has a debt crisis. The Greek debt crisis originated from heavy government spending, and problems escalated over the years due to slowdown in global economic growth. This is a statistic about deficit, surplus, debt and tax revenue as a percentage of GDP from 1981 to 2020. For 1981. Next for 2000, 2010, 2019, and lastly for June 2020.
Next, this will show what happened over Greece from 1981 to 2020. In October 1981, the Pan-Hellenic Socialist movement PASA came into power on a populist platform. Over the next 3 decades, PASOK alternated in power with the New Democracy Party. In a continuing bid to keep Greek voters happy, both parties lavished liberal welfare policies on their electorates, creating a bloated, inefficient, and protectionist economy. Greece was accepted to the EU in 2001, under false pretenses as its deficit and debt were nowhere near within the entry requirements for the Eurozone's single currency. In 2004, the Greek government openly admitted that its budget figures had been changed. After the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008, investors and creditors focused on the colossal sovereign debt loads of the US and Europe. Then Greece defaulted on sovereign debt, which is Greece bailout happened. The bailout was given by the European Commission, European Central Bank and International Monetary Fund were called the Troika. Second bailout in 2012, and third bailout in 2015. As they were recovering slowly, with the surplus in the last 2 years, with the COVID pandemic, their fiscal position went down again.
The causes: during the 1980s, the Greek government had pursued expansionary fiscal and monetary policies. Next, heavy government spending. Other causes are tax evasion, high unemployment and early retirement.
Kuwait, top 10 of the country in the world which has the lowest debt ratio to GDP, as in 2019, their debt to GDP ratio is at 14.8%. So how did they do that? How did they manage to become one of the wealthiest country with the most expensive currency in the world, but only have that less than a quarter of their GDP? We will see this video explaining it. Kuwait is a small but wealthy country with a population of 4 million people. The country contains vast experience in trading and major oil-producing country. Firstly, to avoid the country from getting a loan which increased debt, it requires a country to have large sum of revenue or running at GDP surplus. This allows the country to be independent in managing their expenditure without the help of any external funds. Kuwait has recorded surplus in their budget for decades until 2014. Their main revenue derived from petroleum. In fact, Kuwait is so dependent towards their gain from petroleum, it accounts over half of their GDP, which also generates 92% of the exports revenue and 90% of the government income. From the year 2014, with the consequences of declining world oil prices, Kuwait recorded for the first time the budget deficit. In 2016, the deficit grew even higher to 13.9% of GDP. But they managed to lower it down to 8.9% of GDP on the following year. Since Kuwait's economy is not much diversified, declining of oil prices impact the economy severely. Fortunately, Kuwait has their backup to recover their losses in decreases of oil prices. Kuwait has 2 reserve funds to be used during an economic emergency. They are called General Reserve Funds and Future Generations Funds. Both of the funds are managed by Kuwait Investment Authority (KIA). In a stable economy where the funds from the reserve are not used, the money will be used for investment in and outside the country in various sectors such as hotels, travels and leisure. This is a way to expand the reserve fund, as in 2019, the KIA is handling assets amounting up to $500 billion, which also the 4th largest funds in the world. In conclusion, even when the world is at economic crisis, Kuwait is able to withstand this, but this will not hold long as funds in the reserve can decrease. Kuwait has to find alternatives to rebound their economy. Thus, Kuwait has to diversify their economy in the future so that they will have more alternative sources of income and able to remain the country with low debt.